Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2023 Awards and Portrait Presentation Ceremony. For those of you who I have not met, I'm Ted Deweese. I'm the Interim Dean of the School of Medicine and CEO of Johns Hopkins Medicine. And again, I want to welcome all of our alumni back home to Johns Hopkins. It's a real pleasure to have you with us. This is such a wonderful event because it forces us to remember in very graphic, stark terms, who and what we are. We have such great leaders at this institution, and it gives us an opportunity to recognize them in a very formal way through awards to recognize their careers in excellence across their specialties, as well as the leadership that they provide both to Johns Hopkins, to the world, but in most important fact, if I've said it in the last meeting, how they all have reflected so much great light on Johns Hopkins and the name of Johns Hopkins. So I am very delighted today to have 16 of those medical leaders with us here, and look forward to that portion of the presentation. I'm also very delighted to have the event co-hosted with me by Dr. Julia Hallery, President of the Johns Hopkins Medical Alumni Association, and as well as Diane Orlinsky. And Diane is also the past president of the Johns Hopkins Medicine Alumni Association. Diane completed her residency here in both internal medicine and in dermatology at Hopkins, and is a fellow of the American Academy of Dermatology, the American Society of Dermatologic Surgery, and of course a member of Alpha Omega Alpha, because once you meet her, you know why she is that smart. And really has been a very dear, long-term friend and supporter of this institution. Diane, thank you for that. Many of you know, obviously, Dr. Haller, who is also an intern and resident here at Johns Hopkins in the Wilmer Institute. She became an esteemed faculty member of that mighty entity before she left us, not that we're bitter about that, to become the ophthalmologist-in-chief at the Wills Eye Center and the chair of ophthalmology at Thomas Jefferson. She also takes after her two parents who were also on the Alumni Association. So we're very grateful for your leadership, Julia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted. I'm so honored to participate in today's ceremony and welcome you all on behalf of the Johns Hopkins Medical Alumni Association. We have such a lineup of all-stars today, and I would encourage everybody to Google each and every one. I can tell you that the wonderful bios are totally inadequate. There is so much more to the phenomenal people who are winning the awards tonight. Today's first award presentations are the Distinguished Medical Alumni Awards, honoring alumni of the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine and the Johns Hopkins Hospital who have demonstrated excellence and achievement through their personal and their professional accomplishments. Our first recipient is Dr. Marcela G. Del Carmen. Dr. Del Carmen is the president of the Massachusetts General Physicians Organization at Mass General Hospital. Born in Managua, Nicaragua, she escaped at the age of 10, shepherded by the Red Cross to the United States. She has dedicated her research to the study of disparities in gynecologic cancer outcomes in underserved communities, as well as clinical trials in GYN oncology. She is a notable mentor of underrepresented students throughout her career. Since 2015, she has been a professor of obstetrics, gynecology, and reproductive biology at the Harvard Medical School, the first woman and Latina to ascend to the academic rank of professor in the specialty and in gynecologic oncology at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Del Carmen also serves as a fellow of the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists and the American College of Surgeons, and as a member of the Society of Gynecologic Oncology, the International Gynecologic Cancer Society, and the New England Society of Gynecologic Oncologists, all in leadership roles. She has offered over 250 papers and received innumerable teaching and service awards. Dr. Del Carmen, we are so pleased to have you receive this award. Dr. Del Carmen brought a nice cheering section from the MGH with her, I think. Our next award recipient is Dr. Eva Feldman. Dr. Feldman is the director of the ALS Center of Excellence and Neuro Network for Emerging Therapies at the University of Michigan. She also serves as the University of Michigan James W. Albert's Distinguished University Professor and the Russell N. DeJong Professor of Neurology at Michigan Medicine. Dr. Feldman has trained over 100 postdoctoral neuroscience fellows and neurologists and founded and directed the school's A. Alfred Taubman Medical Research Institute for almost a decade. Dr. Feldman has received numerous accolades. She is the only individual to receive the University of Michigan's Early Distinguished Career Award, Distinguished Faculty Achievement Award, and Distinguished Alumnus Achievement Award. So she's racking up another one today. She is the first woman to receive the American Clinical Neurophysiologic Society's Robert S. Schwab Award. She has published over 500 articles and 5 books. Dr. Feldman, congratulations on your well-deserved award. Next, we have Dr. David S. Goldstein, our next award recipient. Dr. Goldstein is a senior investigator in the National Institute of Neurological Diseases and Stroke and an attending physician at the Clinical Science of the National Institutes of Health. He founded and has since directed the Autonomic Medicine section and has received the Distinguished Investigator Award of the Society of Clinical and Translational Science, the Schatz Award in Autonomic Disorders of the American Academy of Neurology, and the NIH Distinguished Clinical Teacher Award, as well as 2 NINDS Directors Awards for his remarkable mentorship. The author of more than 650 cited publications and several books, we are honored to have him get this award from our Alumni Society today. Next, we have Dr. David L. Jackson. Dr. Jackson is the president of Jackson Associates Incorporated, a healthcare consulting firm focusing on quality of care issues. He earned his PhD in neurophysiology from Johns Hopkins in 1966 with distinction. He then became professor of medicine and director of critical care medicine at Case Western Reserve. He returned to Hopkins to serve as an adjunct professor of geriatric medicine and served on our admissions committee for almost 2 decades. He may have admitted many of you here in the audience. He also served as the director of the Ohio Department of Health from 1983 to 1986. Active in healthcare politics, Dr. Jackson was elected as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1980 and 1992. In 1973, Dr. Jackson became a White House Fellow, and in 1993, a Fellow of the White House Task Force for Healthcare Reform. He is also the founder of 2 startup companies. So very broad bandwidth. Dr. Jackson, congratulations from Hopkins on your award. And I'll now welcome Dr. Orlinsky, who you've already heard wonderful things about with her brilliant AOA, past president of the Hopkins Medicine Alumni Association, for the rest of the awards. Thank you.
Talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. Thank you, Julie. I'm really honored to participate in today's ceremony as we recognize such a remarkable group of people. I would also like to add a welcome to all of today's guests on behalf of the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association. It's an honor to be a part of today's program. In case you all didn't know, which I think you do, the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association represents all 9 academic divisions of Johns Hopkins. It truly says something about the accomplishments of those associated with Johns Hopkins to have such a distinguished gathering of recipients in our presence today. We will now present awards to those individuals who have been named by the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association as Distinguished Alumni for 2023. Established in 1978, the Distinguished Alumni Awards those who have typified the Johns Hopkins tradition of excellence and have brought credit to the university through their personal accomplishments, professional achievement, or humanitarian service. Today, we celebrate the Distinguished Alumni. The first recipient of the 2023 Distinguished Alumnus Award is Mr. Bruce Blossom. Mr. Blosson earned his Master of Arts in Medical and Biological Illustration from Johns Hopkins in 1987. In 1991, he founded Blosson Medical, which makes its extensive library content consisting of over 32,000 images available for multiple platforms. Mr. Blosson's first book, The Complete Blosson Human Anatomy and Physiology Experience, was released in 2021. Mr. Blosson is also working with Johns Hopkins on an education initiative to create greater racial diversity in the imagery, as well as to rewrite the content for a lower reading level. Mr. Blosson is unable to be with us this afternoon, so I will accept his award. Thank you. Why, thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Blosson. The second recipient of the 2023 Distinguished Alumna Award is Dr. Lisa Ibwanu Davis. Dr. Ibwanu Davis is the Vice President of Medical Innovations at DH Diagnostics. She serves as a board director for Omega Healthcare and Avanos Medical. She is also on the Board of Trustees for Johns Hopkins Medicine and on the Board of Advisors for the School of Education. Dr. Ibwanu received her medical and public health degrees from Johns Hopkins in 1983. She was part of the first large group of Black medical students recruited by one of my faves, Dr. Levi Watkins. She has also served on the Bloomberg School of Public Health's advisory board. Dr. Ibwanu Davis has worked most of her professional life to increase access to medicine on a global scale and decrease health disparities. Dr. Morfu, Dean of the School of Education at which Lisa is very involved, is with us this afternoon. Dr. Morfu, can you please come up and join Dr. Deweese in presenting Dr. Ibwanu Davis with this wonderful award? The next recipient of the 2023 Distinguished Alumnus Award is Dr. W. Bruce Fye. Dr. Fye is an internationally recognized cardiologist, historian of medicine, and medical bibliophile. In addition to 3 degrees from Hopkins, Dr. Fye did a fellowship in cardiology at Hopkins, where he was a Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar. In 1978, he joined the Marshfield Clinic in Wisconsin, where he founded the echocardiography laboratory and served as chair of the cardiology department for 18 years. From 2000 until his retirement in 2014, he was a cardiologist and professor of medicine and the history of medicine at Mayo Clinic. He has published 3 books and more than 100 historical and biographical papers. Dr. Fye has been president of the American College of Cardiology, the American Osler Society, and the American Association for the History of Medicine, which awarded him the Welch Medal and Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Fye is also not able to be with us this afternoon, but I understand that he is joining us via the live stream. I accept this award on his behalf. The next recipient of the 2023 Distinguished Alumni Award is Dr. Jane Oskey. Dr. Oskey is a staff pediatrician at the Tuba City Regional Health Care Corporation and Sacred Peaks Health Center, and an adjunct clinical instructor in pediatrics at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. She currently serves as chair of the Indian Health Special Interest Group for the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Native American Child Health, member of the Arizona chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics Vaccines for Children Committee, and chair of the Tuba City Regional Healthcare Infection Prevention Committee, and co-chair of the Tuba City Regional Healthcare Epidemic Response Team. In 2017, Dr. Oskey was awarded the Community Hero Award from the Johns Hopkins University Alumni Association. She has published over 9 works, 2 texts, and 2 book chapters, and has previously served on the editorial boards of the Journal of Pediatrics, Contemporary Pediatrics, and the Physicians for DHA newsletter. Dr. Oskey, please come forward. We will now present the Community Champion Award, which recognizes outstanding contributions that address critical social, economic, and environmental needs throughout our society and impact communities. The 2023 Community Champion Award goes to Dr. C. Nicholas Cuneo for his work as the co-founder and medical director of the Johns Hopkins Esperanza Aceli Women Enterprise and Loyola Refugee Health and Asylum Collaborative, serving immigrant survivors of torture and trauma-seeking refuge in the U.S. Dr. Cuneo began working with refugees in Baltimore while a student at the School of Medicine. In 2011, he co-founded the Refugee Health Partnership, which pairs teams of medical students with recently resettled refugees to provide healthcare advocacy, mentorship, and navigation. After graduating from medical school in 2015, Dr. Cuneo completed a combined residency in internal medicine and pediatrics at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Boston Children's Hospital. He also earned a master's degree in public health from Harvard University in 2020. In the summer of 2020, Dr. Cuneo returned to Johns Hopkins as an assistant professor of medicine and pediatrics and made starting Baltimore's first comprehensive refugee health and asylum clinic a priority. Dr. Cuneo, please come up and accept your award. Next, the Heritage Award honors alumni who have contributed outstanding service over an extended period to the progress of the university or the activities of the Johns Hopkins Alumni Association. The 2023 Heritage Award goes to Dr. Daniel Nyhan. Dr. Nyhan has been a true champion, leader, and mentor who has served in multiple leadership, operations, and administration capacities for the past 40 years. Over 1,000 students and fellows have benefited from his teaching experience and mentorship. Among his many accomplishments, Dr. Nyhan serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Cardiothoracic and Vascular Anesthesia and is a reviewer for the Anesthesiology Journal. He was a member of the Johns Hopkins Faculty Senate and a member of several professional organizations, including the American Society of Anesthesiologists, Association of Cardiovascular Anesthesiologists, and he currently chairs the advisory committee to the Maryland Physician Health Program. Dr. Nyhan, please come up and accept your award. I would like to welcome back Dr. Howard to present the remaining awards.
Thank you, and congratulations to all those incredible people. Next is the Asper Award. Dr. Samuel Asper, a 1940 graduate of the School of Medicine who served as Dean of the American University of Beirut School of Medicine in the mid to late 1970s, established the Samuel P. Asper Award for Achievement in Advancing International Medical Education in 1996. The award recognizes members of the Johns Hopkins Medicine Alumni Association who, after training at Hopkins, return to their home countries to make significant impact on the health and education of their fellow citizens. Past recipients have represented Panama, China, Mexico, Iran, Europe, Australia, as well as the United States. This year's recipient is Dr. Evelyn Hitti. Dr. Hitti is the chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine and a professor of clinical emergency medicine at the American University of Beirut Medical Center, appropriately enough. In 2009, Dr. Hitti returned to Lebanon, her country of birth, where she transformed the medical center's small emergency medicine and acute care clinical operation into the largest emergency medicine academic department in the region. She also serves as a consulting physician surveyor for the Joint Commission International and an attending physician at the American University of Beirut. Dr. Hitti served as an executive committee member for the Mediterranean Emergency Medicine Congress in 2022 and 23 and co-founded the Lebanese Academy of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Hitti was recently awarded the AAEM David Wager Emergency Academy of Medicine Award and Dr. Christina Costin International Emergency Medicine Leadership Award by the American Academy of Emergency Medicine. She is also a recipient of the International Emergency Medicine Research Excellence Award from the Institute for International Emergency, Disaster, and Refugee Studies at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, and the Excellence in Emergency Medicine Award by the Society of Academic Emergency Medicine. Dr. Hiti, congratulations on this award, and welcome back to the East Baltimore campus. Please come forward. Congratulations. Very well deserved. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Ann Murphy to the podium to present our final award, the Johns Hopkins Women's Medical Alumni Hall of Fame inductee.
Thank you. This is an award that's given annually, with the awardee being selected by the leadership of the Alumni Association for Women. This year, I am proud to present the award in honor and in memory of Barbara Mijon. Her family, or some of her family, is here today. She was a pioneer and professor emeritus in genetic medicine at Johns Hopkins. She was the sixth woman to reach the rank of professor at the School of Medicine. She's known for her pioneering genetics work in sex determination, particularly on the focus on the molecular basis of X chromosome inactivation. She was recognized for her research in this field and the disease consequences of X inactivation. She attended medical school at the University of Buffalo and then went to, or joined us at Johns Hopkins to do a residency in pediatrics, and she subsequently pursued a fellowship in genetics with Dr. Barton Childs. She joined our department as an instructor, and over the years, and it was many years, she gradually rose to professor. She was the founder of the Human Genetics Graduate Program, was a very strong advocate for women in science, and encouraged me in that role. She was on many editorial boards and was the 2016 March of Dimes Colonel Harland Sanders Lifetime Achievement Award in Genetics. And I'd like her family to come up and This is the Mijon family accepting the award. Not all of them are here. One of them lives on the West Coast. But we dearly appreciate your mother, and she was an outstanding scientist.
Well, may I ask we can have another round of applause for all these distinguished award winners. And a big thanks to Dr. Haller and Dr. Orlitsky for your help today. Thank you very much and for your leadership. So the portrait collection of the Johns Hopkins Hospital and the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine expands every year because, of course, we have such great leaders that have changed the world, and they are often recognized both by the awards you've seen, but by portraiture. Our collection is now over 300, which includes many great educators, leaders, department directors, deans, some of our most important philanthropists, all those who have given their time and talents and energies to improve and reflect so greatly on the name of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. So I'd like to take a quick moment before we get to the portraiture unveiling to recognize two of the artists who are behind today's portraits. One, Ms. Lisa Egley. Ms. Egley, if you could stand and we can recognize you. And Ms. Egley, may I say parenthetically, your mother was a wonderful, wonderful person, and your father as well. Thank you for that. And also Ms. Judy Taylor. Ms. Taylor? So we look forward to seeing your wonderful work. So I'm delighted to ask our most recent past dean, Dr. Paul Rothman, who we're so happy to welcome back, Paul, whose portrait will also be unveiled today, but he is going to come to the podium to talk about our first portrait unveiling. Paul?
Good afternoon. They're alive. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and introduce Mark Anderson's portrait. The definer of all that is real, ChatGPT, defines a physician scientist as an individual who has both medical and scientific training and actively engages in medical practice as well as scientific research. They combine their clinical expertise with a deep understanding of scientific principles to address medical questions and advance knowledge in their field. You know, you would have spent a lot less time to just say, Dr. Mark Anderson. Mark is a quintessential physician scientist. A little bit about him. There's a nice summary in the brochures, but I'll just say a little bit. He was exposed to academic healthcare from birth. He was born at University of Iowa Hospital and Clinic, but he grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. His dad was a physician there, and both his paternal grandparents were physicians. Great quote from Mark: "It was hard to not think about being in medicine." Despite his family history, he actually didn't want to pursue medicine. His initial predilection was going to law school, something that was not so predetermined. And he loved history and political science. In fact, those were his first majors as an undergrad. But eventually he was just drawn to several factors, one of which is his so interest in biology and the discoveries that were occurring at the time. Mark got his undergraduate degree in biology at Macalester in Minnesota, and he got his PhD and MD at the University of Minnesota. Great anecdote is Mark's mentor for his PI for his PhD died while Mark was getting his PhD, so he actually had to switch to a different PI in the middle of his thesis. He then went to Stanford for his internal medicine and his fellowship in cardiology and clinical electrophysiology. Again, this time his PI had healthcare issues. And again, Mark had to finish his fellowship research by himself. And in fact, some of the findings that he would later pursue for his entire career came out of those late studies. He then went to Vanderbilt, where his PI didn't die. He went there in 1996 and then rose to be the director of the arrhythmia service there, and then was recruited to the Iowa University Carver College of Medicine as the head of cardiology in 2005, later becoming the chairman of the Department of Medicine. He was recruited here in 2014 to become the chairman of the Department of Medicine, the William Osler Professor of Medicine, and the physician-in-chief of the Johns Hopkins Hospital. There's a nice summary of Mark's research in your pamphlet. He's been studying a protein called CAM kinase 2. Initially studied it because of its potential role in arrhythmias and heart failure, but found that in fact that the protein goes awry in many other diseases such as asthma. He has 160 reviewed journal papers and book chapters. He's got many awards, National Academy of Medicine, ASCI, AAP, was the president of the Association of Professors in Medicine and the president of the Scientific Advisory Committee for the LeDuc Foundation. Mark was the 11th permanent director of the Department of Medicine here, following such greats as Mike Weisfeld, who's in the audience, Ed Benz, Jack Stovall, Victor McCusack, McKee Harvey, and William Osler, just to name a few. I asked some of the people in the Department of Medicine, tell me what was great about Mark and what he did that was really set him apart from others. So first of all, they said he was an active physician scientist during his entire time here as chair of medicine, and was a champion of the physician scientist here. He launched the physician scientist pathway for the residency program. He defined a leadership structure with strong vice chairs who had delegated roles to help run the department. He was great at obtaining philanthropy and began the inaugural Osler Advisory Board. He was a great collaborator, not only in the other clinical departments, but he built bridges to the basic science departments, to other schools, such as the School of Engineering here at Hopkins. One thing that really stood out was his great efforts in diversity and inclusion. When he came, there was one female division director, and now there are 6. He came, there were no division chiefs who were from groups that are underrepresented in medicine, and now there are 4. This really resonated also through his vice chair leadership. He really was an advocate for that throughout his time here. He helped integrate the Bayview campus more strongly than it had been before, and he recruited several stellar division chiefs. When I think of Mark's time here, those are all true, but I still think of him most during the pandemic. And I have to quote William Osler. He also said, "Be calm and strong and patient, meet failure and disappointment with courage, rise superior to the trials of life, and never give in to hopelessness or despair. In danger and adversity, cling to your principles and ideals, equiminitas." I think Mark's leadership during the pandemic demonstrated that. He was out there every day, both at Bayview and Hopkins Hospital. He was rounding, he was advocated, as I can tell you, for his faculty and residents on a daily basis, trying to ensure that those folks who really carried the brunt of the pandemic was supported and got the recognition they deserved and help they deserved. So I think Mark, I think you should have been the Osler professor because you fit right in. Personally, everything he did was due to his wife, Sarah, because I know them very well, and Sarah's here, and his 3 children, Evelyn and Elizabeth, and Carolyn, who's here. Mark is brilliant, warm, humorous, humble, lives with life and vigor and vitality, and I think is a very special person, and we are glad he was with us at Hopkins, and also glad that he's got his position at the University of Chicago. So, Mark, thank you. Why don't you come up and we can look at your portrait.
Mark, congratulations. You look better on paint, actually. Paul, thank you for that. Next, I'd like to invite the president of the Johns Hopkins Health System, the executive vice president of Johns Hopkins Medicine, my partner, Kevin Sowers.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you all for being here today. In an organization like Johns Hopkins with a noble history that actually forms the foundations of the story of medicine in the United States, we endeavor every day to build upon the legacy of excellence that Johns Hopkins himself began constructing so long ago. I think you would agree it's an honor and a privilege to carry that legacy forward. And it's also up to us as leaders to not only drive this organization into the future, but we also must preserve the stories that form our history and ensure that those who have contributed to this enduring narrative are not forgotten. So today it is my honor to present the portrait of Dr. Rick Bennett. Rick's origins began at Hopkins in 1978 when he came to the campus as a medical student. After graduation, he began an internship at what was then called the Baltimore City Hospital and is now known as Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center. Rick is originally from Baltimore, and he was influenced early on by his family's business, which was nursing homes. After completing his residency at the hospital, he pursued a fellowship in geriatric medicine and gerontology at Hopkins. And from 1990 to 2002, he served as a guest researcher at the National Institute of Aging's Laboratory of Clinical Immunology. In 1994, Rick was named Johns Hopkins Bayview Director for Long-Term Care. He also continued to teach and served as the principal investigator for the Geriatrics NIH T32 training grant. As his career evolved, he took on many roles, and I mean many roles, including the role of Vice President of Medical Affairs and Chief Operating Officer. Throughout his career, Rick maintained a steadfast commitment to mentoring the next generation of physicians and healthcare leaders. This has included his ongoing role as preceptor for the medical center's administrative residency program. Rick served on the Johns Hopkins Bayview leadership team for almost 30 years. During his tenure as president, the Bayview campus saw the opening of the 301 building, which brought clinical care and research under one roof, the Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, which brought radiation oncology to the campus for the first time, and the North Pavilion, which improved our community's access to emergency and trauma medicine. He used his 44-year career to make a difference in the lives of so many and to carry our mission forward. And by commissioning this portrait of Rick, we acknowledge his commitment to the field of medicine, to the people of Bayview, and to Johns Hopkins Medicine. And we honor his lasting contribution to our community. Rick, may this portrait preserve your legacy in a place you hold so dear. I want to personally thank you for your leadership. Rick, if you come forward.
Congratulations, Rick. That's wonderful. Next, I'd like to invite Professor Gary Cutting, Professor of Genetic Medicine, to present our next portrait. Gary?
I have the honor of one of Haig Kazazi's mentee of saying a few words on behalf of him. But first, I wanted to recognize the members of Haig's family who are in attendance, Lily, his wife, Sonia, and Haig III, and they will join me for the unveiling. Haig spent his entire career passionately devoted to science, and particularly to human genetics. Most of Haig's academic life was at Johns Hopkins, starting with medical school, then pediatric residency, followed by training in genetics with Barton Childs. He joined the Hopkins faculty in 1969 and rose to full professor 8 years later in 1977. In addition to running a highly productive research program, Haig oversaw the formation and was the first director of the Center for Medical Genetics that combined the pediatric and adult genetic units at Hopkins. The center evolved into an institute that was named after two prominent Hopkins geneticists, Dan Nathans, who was a Nobel Prize winner, and Lasker awardee Victor McKusick. The institute became a full-fledged department of the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in 2019. Haig's early career focused on the genetics of beta thalassemia and hemophilia. Along with Stiliano Santarakis at Hopkins and Stu Orkin at Harvard, he developed methods for prenatal diagnosis of sickle cell disease that led to the formation of one of the first clinical genetic testing laboratories in the world. That laboratory, the Hopkins DNA Diagnostic Lab, is still in operation today. In a later phase of his career, Haig assumed the chair of the Department of Genetics at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. He held the position for 12 years before returning to Hopkins to focus on his research on transposable genetic elements. His scientific achievements were recognized in 2008 by the William Allen Award, the top prize from the American Society of Human Genetics, and his election to the National Academy of Sciences in 2018, an honor with which Haig was particularly pleased. But if I asked Haig what academic achievement satisfied him the most, I'm confident Haig would talk about the many careers he had inspired. Haig was a prolific mentor, overseeing the successful transition of dozens and dozens of fellows and graduate students to be independent researchers. Most of these trainees have become highly successful scientists and physician scientists who have received numerous honors, including a Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine. Over a 50-year span, he conveyed to everyone his unbounded enthusiasm for science and the joy in finding something unexpected. He was a great mentor because he was genuinely interested in your science, in your career, in your successes, and yes, even your failures. As such, Haig was a role model for mentoring that many strive to emulate. Haig's excitement about science and discovery continued into his years after retiring from running a lab. And in this way, he left lasting impressions upon the newest generations of scientists. In concluding, Haig Kazazian Jr.'s portrait is a lasting remembrance of his visual countenance, but his colleagues and mentees carry the greater gift of his wisdom and unwavering support. Thank you.
Congratulations to the Kazazian family. That's really wonderful. Haig was a wonderful man. Our final portrait will be discussed by our Executive Vice Dean for the School of Medicine, Landon King. Landon, please.
Well, good afternoon. I first heard of Paul Rothman in about 2002. Mike Weisfeld, who was, as Paul noted, Mark Anderson's predecessor as the OSA professor and chair of the Department of Medicine, told me while he was the chair of medicine at Columbia, he had identified a rheumatologist to go become the chair of the Division of Pulmonary Critical Care Medicine and Allergy at Columbia. Thought it was a harebrained idea, but in fact said, but the person who made that work was very, very special. Paul was at Columbia, had an incredibly successful career, went to Iowa as the chair of medicine. After a few years, became the dean of medicine, and in July of 2012, we were fortunate enough to lure him back east to become the dean and CEO for Johns Hopkins Medicine. So I'm going to ask you just to reflect for a moment on a few things. The first, Johns Hopkins Medicine Strategic Plan. The creation of the role of Chief Diversity Officer for Johns Hopkins Medicine. Enhanced efforts to support people of diverse backgrounds across the organization and in our community. Oh, okay. Yeah. I'll try to enunciate more clearly. Development of a new campus plan, a campus master plan, and the planning and implementation for a critically needed research building that, as you can see if you've been on Monument Street today, is deep into construction. The creation of the Office of Well-Being and a commitment to programs supporting all of the members of our Johns Hopkins Medicine community. With Kevin, the development of a clinical roadmap that is informing and defining our view of how we move forward as Johns Hopkins Medicine. An increase in nearly 60% in grant awards. Just think about that. We're a big place. You all know us to be a big research organization. An increase in nearly 60% of grant awards during his tenure. A near doubling of clinical revenue in the School of Medicine. A champion for science, and I suspect you could hear that in his appreciation for Mark Anderson and the work that he did. A devout champion of science who at various times across the last 6 or 8 years has been the national voice for advancing the importance of fundamental science and translational science, not just for medicine, but for the people of the country. The establishment of the Clinical Excellence Promotion Pathway. So Paul would understandably note that those and other things were all team sport here, and that would be correct. But I offer to you that this brief and partial recitation of achievements occurred not just under Paul Rothman's watch, but very specifically through his leadership. It was not just a reflection of the vision, the intention that went into enacting those few things that I described and many, many more that I won't describe, but in fact how he engaged the community, the way he brought all of us along to try to get to the place where he thought Johns Hopkins Medicine could thrive even beyond our history. Oh, and then we had a pandemic. Johns Hopkins led throughout the pandemic, and Paul led Johns Hopkins with 2 guiding tenets: follow the science and do everything possible to keep our patients and our Johns Hopkins community safe. Throughout his tenure, Paul Rothman repeatedly demonstrated his unwavering commitment to the mission, values, people, potential, and impact of Johns Hopkins. For that, Paul, we are all deeply grateful. I will say that he's been in Boulder, working as a postdoctoral fellow in a laboratory. I've gotten occasional pictures of him in jeans and a flannel shirt saying, "Do you think anybody wants a postdoc?" And I've sent back, "We can't afford you." But on behalf of colleagues throughout Johns Hopkins, it is a great privilege to participate in this portrait unveiling and to say thank you for all that you have done to advance the mission of Johns Hopkins Medicine. Thank you, Paul.
Congratulations, Paul. Landon, thank you for summing up, I think, the feelings of most of us about Paul Rothman. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Johns Hopkins University and the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, I am very happy and it gives me great pleasure to accept these portraits on behalf of these institutions. As I noted, the influence of these 4 individuals on Johns Hopkins cannot be understated, and you all own the future that we have together. So thank you for what you've done for us. So to close the ceremony, I'd just like to ask all of us to, one more time, give our congratulations and respect to the 4 individuals. And with that, we'll close the ceremony. There's a reception out back, and we'd ask you all to stay and enjoy. Thank you.